Hi, my name is Carly Rayla. I am the current president of the North American SocioTechnical System Roundtable. I'm also on our Global Coordination Committee, and this Making Work Worth Doing session is part of an annual sequence of events that we have. So at the end of this call, we'll tell you about the next one we're going to have, but we are really excited today to be hosting this particular team of panelists on the topic of human robot teams and AI and how socio-technical systems principles help in that development. We have partnered with Tavistock, and I'd like to pass the time over to my Tavistock associate, Anya, who is just with Valentina have done extensive work to get us together here today. So really grateful to her. And Anya, I'll turn the time over to you.
Great, thank you, Carly, and a very warm welcome for me as well, or perhaps a quite heated one, given the heat wave in Europe. Um, yes, so I'm Anja Neumann. I'm a principal, as Carly already said, a principal, a consultant and artist researcher at the Tavistock Institute of Human Relations based in London, and delighted to convene this panel with Carly and everyone else. So I also want to take a look who's already here in the room, and introductions are piling in as I speak in the chat, and we have people calling in from across the world and across disciplines. That's very much the principle of this discussions. I invited an engineers, an ethicist, organizational psychologist, project managers, designers, clinical consultants, artists, performers, software engineers, and researchers. And so some of you have lived inside sociotechnical systems thinking and practice for decades. And for others, I'm assuming the sociotechnical may be a brand new word, and perhaps you use a different language for a similar problem. So this mix and the plurality of perspectives is intended, and the whole point of today's session. STS has always, so sociotechnical systems thinking and practice has always insisted that there's no single discipline which owns the problem. So a quick word also, I've asked you about your motivations to be here, and just a quick word to contextualize or frame why I agreed to host the session with Carly and Valentina. Also exploiting my power as a convener, of course, but questions of human-machine boundaries are quite real and live in my work at the Tavistock. Um, Thinking about the Tavistock Institute, a lot of people refer to it as the birthplace of STS. And I'm part of a multidisciplinary team there that works on expanding what sociotechnical systems theory and practice means today in the age of AI. And we're predominantly working on human AI teams and systems. So it's even more exciting to see what we can learn from human robot teams and how these theories are still relevant today. So two strands of work matter for today, and one is the work which is going on at the Tavistock Institute in the active labor market policy, which we are building, where we are building a new sociotechnical systems evaluation framework to improve the design and the of complex AI systems and to understand the latest developments on the labor market, which is going to be tested through innovation experiments across Europe. And the other strand I just want to briefly mention, and it's perhaps less expected, is our arts-based approaches to sociotechnical systems. And I'm just coming back from running a simulation at the Institute, Sociotechnical Systems simulation, where participants actually experience the different dynamics on an individual, group, and systems level that are happening in organizations that go through transformation. So, what is important there is that to understand the body as a site for knowledge in sociotechnical systems, but also understand how groups are organizing themselves and reacting and responding to those changes that are underway. So now, how today works. Let's come back to this group. Because this is not a webinar where you can sit back and answer your emails. This is a promise. This session will be pretty much hands-on. Everyone can contribute. And in a moment, Carly has already placed us actually in the wider Making Work Worth Doing series. And just to say that we're not only going to talk about sociotechnical systems, what we have been designing and planning is that we will actively co-create and become one. So for the next 1.5 hours, the panel and all of you have the chance to constitute a temporary sociotechnical systems. We have, of course, our Zoom platform here. We have your devices you're calling from. We have different role systems within this group, boundaries, technologies, effective experiences, Zoom fatigue probably already setting in, social rules and dynamics, which we are going to explore. And we will even run a diagnostic on ourselves, on the kind of principles we are building and developing as a system, which is going to use a moment of co-design in this room, where I will ask you to share which values, beliefs, principles you consider most important for this live session on Zoom. But first, a decision that belongs to all of us and not to me as the convener is I'd like to invite an AI note taker into the main room to transcribe our conversation so that we can actually explore the human AI dynamics that play out in groups like ours. And yes, the irony is fully intended, a panel on teaming with AI and robots deciding in real time whether to let an AI join the team. So, Valentina, if I can ask you to launch our poll, and the question is simple, whether you are happy for us and consent to an AI note taker transcribing this session, just really limited to the main room, so we can explore the human AI dynamics. We have about a minute to vote. I will vote myself. We should have the results. Also, I should say that any private information will be anonymized and the transcript will be shared only on request. It could also be deleted if people wish so. And that's perhaps information I should have relayed earlier. Valentina, do you have the result?
Yes,
Yeah.
100% yes. Everyone
Oh.
voted yes. Thank you so much.
Surprising.
That's,
Okay, that's great. Great for
very-
us. Thank you.
Yes.
So, is the note taker already in the room? I can't see
Yes,
it, but you might be. Okay.
I allowed it now.
Okay, so it stays in the main room. It's not going to go into the breakout sessions, and we hold that boundary. So either way, yes, we have placed that boundary around a human-machine system and hold that thought because this is exactly what the next 1.5 hours are about. And so now, might I ask Shankar to share the first slide? What we decided is that we are not going to do long introductions. Speakers or panelists will speak to who they are and where they're coming from in their responses. But I wanted to name everyone so people get a sense who the panel and the speaker is. And I will start with our speaker, Professor Shankar Sankaran, who is Professor of Organizational Project Management at the University of Technology in Sydney and Chief Investigator of the Human Robot teaming research hub. And joining us from Australia, where it's just about 2 or 3 p.m., very early in the morning. So thank you, Shankar, for being here under such conditions. And moving on to our panel, roughly traveling across the Western world, we have Professor Helen Hughes, an interdisciplinary organizational psychologist and associate professor at the University of Leeds, and leading the STS Hub and the Behavior Lab. Unfortunately, Thomas Holleneck can't be with us today because of the heat in Paris, where it's boiling 38 degrees today. And I'm moving on to Jenny McShannon, who is a leadership and system psychodynamic consultant and executive coach based in Brighton and an associate of Tavistock Consulting. I'm very pleased that Henrietta Hale is here, Henny Hale, artist and performance researcher in relational and embodied STS practice, based at the Center of Dance Research in Coventry University and at the Tavistock Institute. Francis Irving, principal software engineer for multi-agent systems, working in civic tech and public interest AI, and based at Sagittal AI. And you already heard from Kali Riele, who mentioned that she is the president of the STS Roundtable, joining us from the United States, and also a human-centered design strategist and project manager. So, and of course, you have already encountered Valentina Moldovan, our community manager lead of the STS Roundtable. Yes. So at this point, I want to hand over to Shankar. The floor is yours. And Shankar is going to set the scene for us and engage us on the latest in human-robot team development. Thank you, Shankar.
Thank you, Anya, and thank you very much for inviting me to be part of this panel, and also to Kali and Valentina, who've been working very hard to get this going. And I'm really thankful, and we will learn from you. We have something to share, and we will also expect to learn from all the experience which is there in the room. So this is new principles for human robot design, and I'm part of the what is called HeartCon, Human Robot Teaming in Construction Research Hub. It's an Australian federal government funded research hub in which we have a responsibility to develop human robot teams for construction sector for the next 5 years. And Helen Hughes is from Leeds University, is part of the hub. So she is actually a partner from Leeds, and we are very thankful that she is contributing to this as well. So before we start, it's quite customary in Australia to acknowledge the country, acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation on whose land the UTS campus stands, and I live as well, and acknowledging the elders as the custodians of knowledge. And then because there are people from different parts of the world, we also want to acknowledge traditional custodians from all over the world whose knowledge we live upon. So I'm going to just focus on these 5-6 things. The first thing is, what's a socio-technical system? Sorry for the typo on that. Why do STS principle proposed earlier have to be reconsidered today? We want to look at the research we conducted, and this was conducted by 3 people: Karen Ang, who is not here today, and Dikai Liu, who is the director of the research hub, to look at the past, what has been done in socio-technical system, and foresee the future, because these people who are working in it are looking at the future as well. Propose modified and new STS principles for our project, which is mainly to ask our people who are doing projects in the hub to look at socio-technical aspects of developing human-robot systems. We show you a very short demonstration of an application, and then we move on to discussions. So for those of you not familiar with socio-technical system, STS recognizes that organizations are composed of people and technology, and they are interrelated. and both technology and people affect each other while they're working in collaboration. And the idea of the STS is to optimize the organizational social system and the technology system as well. And we think that organization will only achieve optimal functionality if we also include the environment into account. So why we started this study? This study was started in 2022 when the project management people in our university and the engineering people in the university joined together to work on human robot teams. And then after 3 years, we got a grant from the government. So we found that traditional STS principle proposed joint optimization, but human robot teams pose unique challenges, such as autonomy, where it might shift between the human and the robot. They have shared models, the mental models, trust between robots, and awareness of the robots and humans working. Because construction sector is a very dynamic area. It's not where you can lock up a robot in a cage. You have to work with the robot working in the construction site. So the idea, our aim was to extend the socio-technical principles already existing and guide them to develop for effective design. So we then looked at 34 socio-technical principles and put them in 7 themes, and I'll show that later on. We actually looked at probably 150 socio-technical system principles from the literature and chose those which we think was relevant. And then we asked the engineers in the Robotics Institute who have been developing robots for the last 20 years in Sydney and using it in various places, what do you think are the socio-technical principles that will apply in this new hub? And they proposed 8 principles, and we're happy to get your feedback on that. And so we want to use this for practical application. So all the principles are given to the project teams in the hub, and they will report on how they are using it. So this is the methodology. I won't go into details, but what we did was we start with a structured literature review, and then we reviewed the existing principles and decided which were applicable. And then we have a collaborative session. So Karen Ung, who is a postdoc, she worked on developing these principles, and she comes from a marketing management background and project management background. And myself, I come from a project management, and we sat down with the robotics team in UTS in our university, and looked at discussions with them, what is relevant and what is new, and then we analyze them and put them into themes. So you can read about this, and I have put references to the paper. The paper explains exactly how we did this. So it's a multidisciplinary structured review process. We had robotics engineers, robotic designers, manager of the robotics team, myself coming from a project and construction management background, and Karen, who worked as a postdoc. And Karen was my PhD student before. And then identify existing principles relevant to HRTs, adapt principles to robotic context, and propose new principles. That was the activity. So it was in adapting existing principles, looking at joint optimization, autonomy between humans and robots. We looked at the original Chern's principle, a minimum critical specification, but rules will evolve dynamically, and participative design. So we considered various things. So these are the 8 new principles that came out of our discussions with the engineers who have been working in robotics for more than 2 decades. So we looked at adaptive autonomy, agile and responsive, cognitive workload, collaborative sense making, ethical consideration, transparency and explainability, which is becoming important in AI, trustworthiness, and unpredictability management. And I have a PhD student who is actually listening to me, who is doing research on trustworthiness as well. So these are the new principles, but we are going to discuss both new and old principles. So we took all the themes and tried to put them into different boxes. So these are the themes, 7 themes. And they are the boxes in yellow are the new principles, and the boxes on white are the original principle. We slightly tweaked them so that they will be applicable to human robot situation. So this is a short demo of one of the application which we are doing in our lab.
Human-robot teaming can be effectively used to accomplish collaborative construction tasks, such as floor tiling. This video demonstrates the CANbot, which is tasked with carrying heavy tiles, a role that alleviates the physically demanding aspects of lifting, bending, and transporting for the human operator. This division of labor allows the human worker to focus on the skilled task of precisely placing each tile, optimizing both efficiency and quality. The communication between the human worker and the CANbot is a blend of intuitive gestures and speech, enabling a seamless and natural interaction.
Please wait until I get another tile for you.
The CANbot is also equipped with advanced safety features, ensuring the protection of the human operator from potential accidents. These safety functionalities are crucial in maintaining a secure and effective work setting. By integrating human-robot teams, we can effectively eliminate hazardous and monotonous tasks, paving the way for a more inclusive construction sector. This shift is instrumental in attracting diverse groups, including women and individuals with disabilities, who have historically been underrepresented in heavy construction. Thus, human-robot teaming represents not just a leap in technological advancement, but also a significant market opportunity, fostering resilience and inclusivity in the construction sector. The CANbot is designed to be modular, allowing for the interchangeability of arms and bases, accommodating various tools and terrains to suit diverse construction environments. The CANbot exemplifies the concept of effective human-robot collaboration. Its design, a mobile manipulator combining a robotic arm with a mobile base and assistive or autonomous operational capabilities, highlights the potential synergy between humans and robotics in the construction industry.
So I would like to ask Helen to reflect on this because she actually came to our lab and looked at this demonstration, but it was done by somebody else. But I'd like to offer the floor to Helen to talk about what are her reflections when she saw that.
Yeah, thanks, Shankar. So yeah, it's great to be here. I really appreciate the invitation to meet people, and it's really refreshing to be around so many people who share a very similar view of the world, which is really nice. As Shankar mentioned, my background's slightly different. So I am an organizational psychologist. I can see there's a few other people from a similar kind of background to me on this call. But I guess I'm particularly excited about the possibilities around sort of human-robot teaming interactions. I mean, there's so many sort of layers to this, aren't there? But when I kind of saw the robots that Shankar and the team are working on, I think it's really exciting because for so long I mean, obviously there's all the talk of, the robots are going to change the world, and in time they may well do that. But I think my reflections on this at the moment are that we've talked for a long time around things like allocation of function and in this space, and kind of working out, well, where do humans and technologies, so broader, even more broadly than AI, where do they kind of sit? Where do they knit together? Where do these things sort of sit within a workflow? And whilst these robots have the ability to kind of iterate and respond and learn and develop their response to the human that they're interacting with, I think it's quite interesting that these particular robots are still allocated a particular function, which in this case is to lay the tile. In other cases that we saw when we were in Australia recently, it might be that they're drilling and they're laying some nails or pins or whatever. But the allocation is the function that they've been asked to do. They're not sort of building the whole house or but doing everything within something. So at the moment we still, I think, have this level of autonomy and opportunity to sort of decide who does what. I think my reflection was that I'm not sure where this ends, because there's clearly this learning that these robots are able to do means that the extent to which they become a team member has that possibility to develop. And I think there's a whole set of principles, as Shankar's mentioned, which we need to rethink then in the context of this kind of new world. In particular, one of the things that really struck me, which I'd be interested to hear others' views on, is this idea of trustworthiness. Because as my understanding, whenever I've sort of done work with in sort of human technology teams, so taking AI out, it's usually a question of, how much does the human trust the technology? And then everything is kind of designed around the extent to which the human involved trusts the technology. But I think what's particularly interesting with the robotics stuff is that, and the AI input, is that actually the robot trusts the human, and the extent to which the robot trusts the human impacts and affects reciprocally what happens next. And I think that's a really different way of thinking about humans and socio-technical systems. So maybe I'll pause then, but that's kind of my initial reflections. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. So we're going to go into discussion. These slides will be distributed to you. On the last slide, I have the references for some of the work we have done over the work that has been carried out, including the people from Leeds and us. So you can have those slides for further readings. So I now hand it over to Anya, and I'll stop sharing the slides.
Thank you, Shankar. That's amazing. That's great. And we will go into discussion, indeed. And before we do that, I want to involve everyone in the room and have for a quick diagnostic to take the temperature of the room. We have already heard something about the new principles, STS principles, which have been introduced from Shankar to human robot teams. And I do wonder, for our live settings, what are the assumed, or actually what are the STS principles that are at work here in this space? This might be values, behaviors, principles, propositions, assumptions we have about how we are interacting in this space. And what I've done is I pre-selected, so I went kind of along with Shankar's process of research, except that I didn't consult everyone in this room, but I pre-selected 12 principles. And this is quite surface level now, and really go with your gut feeling. And I'd like you to just select 3 of them that speak to you, which you deem most relevant and important for our setting today. So just choose 3 principles, and this will then inform how our session will proceed and what we're going to focus on. So we have adaptive autonomy. It's perhaps quite small on the screen, depending on your device. Agile and responsive, unpredictability management, cognitive workload, ethical considerations, joint optimization, a quite established and traditional one, participation and co-design, multidisciplinary, collaborative sense-making, boundary controls, transparency, explainability, and trustworthiness. I will just go through it myself.
Yep, that's correct.
Okay, just
Did
3
they
of them.
did they become bigger now? Because I zoomed out, but did that not make any difference?
I'm not
They
sure.
were fine.
Mine's gone. Okay, do we already have any results?
Yeah, I can end and we can check the results. It's been 1 minute and 15 seconds. Has everyone voted? 42 out of
Perhaps
51.
give it a few more seconds. And to say it's a mood reading, not a verdict. And it's all about having a fast, honest sense of what this room cares about. And I'm curious about the top principles in this room. I think we can close.
Yeah, 45 out of 51 people voted. So we have loads results. Share results.
Okay.
You should now see.
Okay, so
Okay.
I can see that we have clear winners actually. Do we definitely collaborative sense making. I was hoping. 31% both for adaptive autonomy and ethical considerations and participation and co-design. I guess that's a way around. Oh, actually, trustworthiness is number 2. And then we have the 3 or 4 number threes, which spreads the topics, which is an interesting result. And perhaps we just take a moment also for what haven't been, to notice what hasn't been put forward and which isn't mentioned. What has the least traction? I'd say that's probably cognitive workload, if I read that correctly.
Right.
Interesting.
That's an important one.
Yes, yes. So what we're gonna do, we have, before we launch into the plenum discussion with the audience, we want to run a few questions with the panelists, and then we will break out into breakout rooms to engage with audience questions. And first of all, I'd like to ask, perhaps it's not a question, it's a provocation. And since we just heard from Shankar about the more traditional STS theory, which was born in a coal mine in the 1950s, and then moving on to Shankar's paper and research, the Advancing STS paper, it provides us with 34 principles for human-robot teams, and we heard 8 of them are entirely new. So my question is whether this is an evolution of sociotechnical systems thinking, or is it a sign that the original theory, is running out of road? So when we are teaming with AI or robots, what is the strength of sociotechnical approaches, and what is it that has been missing in an approach that can broadly be described as quite cognitivist? So it was interesting that cognitive workload wasn't scoring very high, and quite design-oriented framework. So I'm interested in the tension, whether we need what is missing in this, and what is the strength of sociotechnical systems approaches. And well, I wonder whether from the panel, we just heard Helen, but whether Jenny, I don't know, I don't want to put you on the spot, but anybody really from the panel, whether anybody feels moved to respond to this provocation of strength and weaknesses.
Anya,
Yeah?
as the president of the roundtable, I feel somewhat obligated to stand up for STS principles. And I can really speak to both sides of that provocation, because I guess any good theory continues to expand with its practice and as new information becomes available. And I believe STS is just on that maturation path. And we're going to continue to see it develop. If you were to, for instance, take STS principles out of the human-robot teamwork that's been done by Shankar and his team, I don't think you would see such a smooth operation as was shared in that video. And there might be all sorts of underlying challenges related to that work that was done that are not as easily seen, but certainly felt by the workers themselves who are partnering with robots. So I do believe that STS has a place, and it will continue to have a place, where it is often less known or understood. I think it has to do possibly with a lack of a standard structure for which to practice STS. And there will be lots of arguments to this. Many people have developed their own strategies. And I think that speaks to part of the problem and the benefit of STS, is that it is a principles-based approach that is designed by humans for humans working with technology. And so it is adaptive. It is a learning process, and it continues to deliver really wonderful collaborative and jointly optimized results for both the humans and the technology involved. So I would say it is not run out of road.
That was a very passionate defense.
Oh, maybe I can jump in. Oh, Helen, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Jenny. I'll speak after.
Well, I was going to jump in also in defense of the early work. I think quite often we jump into thinking it's irrelevant, it's off its time, it's off its context. But actually, the early work in the 1950s feels really acutely relevant now. And I think what particularly stands out, and maybe what I, as a felt experience, was that the design principles all make sense, they intellectually make sense. But what I was really engaging with when Shankar was presenting the paper and when I read the paper was the felt experience, the sort of the feelings, the response to it, to the principles. So what sometimes feels missing is what Francis put in the chat, which is not attending really to the actuality of the socio, so the unconscious dynamics, the annihilation anxiety, the fear around loss of competence or redundancy, how that might really get in the way, and how that might sort of generate or provoke a lot of defensive behaviors. And so, yeah, I was thinking that they're very relevant. It's good to see them reimagined, as Shankar was describing, for this new context. But it's, annihilation anxiety is very real when anyone crosses the boundary, whether it's a team member or a tool, or introducing a new IT system, or introducing a robot, and even more tricky, I think, when it's an AI or an AI agent. So I think those are the things that sometimes just get overly intellectualized, as in a sense, or dismissed, if you like, is the sort of responsive, and that could show up in either an over-enthusiasm or a resistance.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Helen, yeah. Go on.
Yeah, sorry. So I was just going to jump in and really agree with what's been said, but I think one of the challenges is, so I'm an academic, sort of cards on the table, but I do a lot of applied work and practice as well, and I work across disciplines. And I think one of the things that gets sort of charged against us quite often is one of two views, that either there are so many principles that, like, what do you do with them, because there's just too many things to think about, or it gets reduced to the fact, well, it's just about jointly optimizing the social and the technical, and it's either social or technical. And then in the academic literature, certainly in my space, management scholars and so on, it can be seen as, well, it's done, we know this, we know that we have to think about these things together and in tandem. And so I think actually we're in a more difficult space, because in a sense some academics don't see anything novel anymore, and so there's a need to really show how and why actually this human robot interactions really do change the nature of what we mean by socio-technical. But I think we do have to be careful about how we straddle that, so that we don't make this so difficult that actually people can't. I saw one of the points about Silicon Valley really need to engage with this stuff, and I think the way to make that palatable is that we've got to work on how we think about communicating this. So that's maybe just something I'd throw in.
Thank you, Helen. And before we move on, yeah, just a second. What I picked up, and perhaps something to unpack for later, Jenny, is I found interesting that you seem to suggest that it's easier to engage with robots than with LLMs or generative AI, potentially because of the embodied AI and physicality. But perhaps that's something we can come back to. I can see that both Peter and Shankar have their hands up, and perhaps we go there first. Peter.
I'm nervous and chagrined and overwhelmed and probably some other things. But let's start with those. First of all, I'd like to congratulate all of you for thinking about this stuff. We need to think about it more. And I put a paper in the chat from Eli Berneker. Eli is on the call with us today. And in his paper, which is not well published and well distributed, but it should be, he lists 27 principles. Now, Helen, you made a really good point, I think, that it's hard to think of 27 principles all at once. And what I've found in the design work that I've done is that different principles take more precedent at different phases of a project or as you bounce up against uh, barriers and oppositions and etc. as you do the design work. And so learning how to use principles in a dynamic kind of way, I think is really important. I love the fact that y'all are reconsidering and reframing and reimagining principles. I support that wholeheartedly. However, I want to make one assertion, and that is in my work of the last 50 years doing design, and in my work in the last couple of years of working on AI kind of stuff, what I find, and robotic kind of stuff, what I find is that there are very few people who are out there in the wild um, doing this work that are even thinking about socio-technical ideas and principles. We're all here and we're thinking about it and scratching our heads, but I find that many of the people that I work with aren't even aware of socio-technical ideas and principles. So that's one of the worries that I have is not only do we have to reimagine, recraft our principles, but we also have to figure out how to communicate well more broadly. So I will step off my soapbox at this point.
Thank you very much, Peter. Before we respond to that, I want to hand over to Shankar, and perhaps we can have then a joint response.
Yeah, I think Peter's opinion is very important because that's what we found. We started working with this team of engineers who were developing robot system for the last 20 years. And we came from a management perspective and also project management perspective. And we started talking to them about socio-technical systems. And the language was new. The idea of socio-technical system was not there at the moment, but when we actually evaluated a project they had already done and interviewed the people who were involved in the project, we found that there were some principles they had applied, but like safety and other things, but the general understanding of social. So that was the purpose of this exercise and now we are given them as with all these principles, and they've asked the design team to think what are the principles that actually apply. Some of them may not apply, and you have to think about, and as Peter said, at what stage of design will you apply those? So those are one thing. The second thing I want to point out about jobs and displacement, this is a problem in construction sector. People are worried that if you introduce robots, jobs will be lost. But there are two ideas to develop this hub. One is, of course, the economic aspect of increasing productivity because construction sector's productivity has not come up for the last 80 years. But there's also health and well-being. There are a lot of construction workers who get injured during work. And then the suicide rate of young people in construction is the highest in Australia. And so the well-being aspect and also people who injured coming back to work, they can be assisted with robots. So there are two aspects of, you can say, two aspects of development. So I thought I'll put that in the mix. And the reason why we started was that we thought that the traditional STS principles are more unidirectional, and our principles are more bidirectional, where we assume that the robots and humans will learn from each other and they will provide collaborative intelligence. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Shankar. Yeah, well-being. I guess that puts me to my second question I want to put out there, and I know that we are well not at the end of discussing the first one, but I think in order to layer it, I want to take us onto human-centered AI design, which is I guess which is the approach of socio-technical systems theory and practice. And it is also one of the most repeated phrases in the field right now. And my question is whether it's genuinely possible to build AI systems that maintain human autonomy, agency, and control, or is it a way of making people feel better about something that is structurally not centered on humans at all and difficult to put into practice? For instance, at the moment, there's a lot of discussion about explainability. And then on top of that, is it the right approach after all, or do we require more than human approaches to AI that also include non-human and environmental factors, non-human actors? And I quite like to put this question to Francis, who is somebody who as an engineer, a software engineer, engages with the technical infrastructure on a day-to-day level in order to broaden the field.
Yes. So
Yeah.
software engineering's been like repeatedly radically disrupted for the last 2 years, but particularly so in the last 6 months. And it's still not the case, even in software development, where AIs have been carefully fine-tuned for the last 6 months to be really as good at it as they possibly can be. They are not autonomous in the sense that if you just let them do stuff and don't have human review, don't have humans supervising their own review of themselves, if you don't do that well, you end up with bad software that doesn't work. And you've seen there are increases in outages in some companies who haven't done this well. And I think technically it's just not at the point where you can't make it human-centered yet. If we make an intelligence that can do that, that feels like a different level of technology. I would almost worry about that separately with the singularity and existential risk and stuff. But while their similar current language models are limited in their agency, they can go off and hustle to do something, but they don't have an existence and a responsibility, and they don't have the style of thinking that a human has to be able to have that responsibility. So I think it's critical that we make them more human-centered. The company I work for, we try to do that by integrating them with existing review systems that are used to also check humans' work. I don't think that's the full answer because those systems get overloaded. So we do have to rethink how that works. Yeah, and generally there's a huge gap in the computer sector in the way it's led by Silicon Valley and is very like capitalism running away with itself. That means people aren't really talking about this properly. They're more sort of either very exciting, rushing off with it, or very much no and trying to stop it. And there's not enough detailed discussion of how it impacts teams as a whole. How the socio-technical system stuff is different with AI and with it impacting every white collar job in a way that is different from previous discussions of working on robots.
So can I just clarify? So you're saying it's possible at this stage, it's absolutely possible to build a human-centered AI system.
It's not just possible. I think business-wise right now you have to, or you won't get good outcomes. So there's a business reason to do it. I think we should do it anyway for ethical reasons, but that's it's a slightly different question.
Okay. I want to leave that hanging there and change our mode of engagement in a way that we will, just for 10 minutes, just for a brief period of time, break out in 8 or perhaps less, let's say perhaps 5 breakout rooms. And each panelist will share one of the rooms, and this will also give us or you the opportunity to voice your questions and so yes, you will be randomly allocated, and I see all of you in about 9-10 minutes.
And can we just check the topic that we're talking about? Is it an open conversation?
Yes, I guess it's an open conversation, whatever people want to bring. It could be the topics of the principles which have been scored highest, especially the autonomy one. Oh no, the highest was the shared sensemaking. But there is a prompt which you can use, which is, and I can post that as well. Think of one human AI boundary in your own work. Where is it? And who placed it? And who's holding it? So really thinking about the boundary making we have been trying to do in this space as well with the AI note taker. I can post that question, but anything people want to bring or your own questions to the audience. Okay.
And thank you,
Okay.
Anya and Valentina. Let's go for 7 minutes if we could. I want to come back
7.
before the hour, and just in case we lose a few folks leaving back to work.
Let me update that quickly. Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Going back to Shankar's presentation, any urges to discuss a specific principles or topic or?
For me, it was the trustworthiness,
Mhm.
because in many cases, I might trust the machine, but I don't trust the person who owns the machine. I've worked on construction sites, and you're always worried about it's the owners and the manpower companies and the people you're working with are very important to me. And I want to know who's on the opposite end of things. If I'm drawing cable, if I'm laying tiles, etc., I want to know who I'm working with and whether I can trust them, because there's a lot of accidents occur because I have sloppy workers. So I can have a company that has this great machine, but they don't configure it properly.
All right.
So I'm really secure. I'm looking at the system above most of the time at construction sites, because construction sites are notorious run by how can I put it? Time is very important, and you wouldn't believe some of the accidents that occur because there's a foreman that says you have to get this done in this certain time.
Right.
And you're basically a hired worker in many cases. A lot of the people working on the sites are just hourly workers.
Mm.
So the trust for me I want to understand the system above, as I usually say in social technical system. Who owns this machine?
Mm.
Do you spend a lot of time with contracting then with the owner and different stakeholders in the system?
Yeah. So what I see this all the time is I bring in I'm a contractor, and we're looking at 3D printing of houses. So it's the whole thing before we were looking at machines that print houses.
Mm-hmm.
So we're looking at that 3D printing. We're using cement printing. And the idea is to cut down the labor cost, of course, but then I bring in a contractor, and then all of a sudden those contractors, in this case, this is Sweden, some of them come from Romania, they don't even speak Swedish or English. Like the laborers on these construction sites aren't exactly the most trustworthy people.
Mm.
So I think first we have to look at the.
I mean, that sort of resonates with something that I thought wasn't really discussed very clearly, was about how the human beings decide amongst themselves about how to use the technology. I mean, the robot was very central in terms of laying the tiles, but there wasn't any sort of indication, well, how the human beings as a work group decided amongst themselves about how to engage with the robot and use the robot in terms of construction or whatever the tasks was, which I think, part of the early socio-technical systems was about the use of autonomous work groups where the workers themselves decided what they wanted to do, multitasking, multi-skilling. And I felt that was all a bit missing from the human robot issue about where do the human beings fit in terms of decision making and how they influence and manage the technology. It was all the other way around. I felt like the technology was really managing the humans.
Yeah,
I mean, that's
very valid point, David.
that was the point. That's what struck me. Where's the decision making and where does the thinking take place?
Yeah, Ellie, I think you wanted to come in here. You're muted.
You're muted.
You're still muted.
You're
Just
on mute.
one button. The technologies.
Well, just a quick comment there. As someone who does construction, that machine wouldn't be fired into the rate it was laying tiles are just totally ridiculous. But it's a huge problem, and we have to cut it down because the industry is, and as I say, we're bringing in, especially with the housing shortage, they bring in people all over and the laborers, and they have to pass the test and everything in home. We have these, but it's a problem. Safety is a problem with unskilled construction laborers.
My problem with our field is I come from a very different perspective. I'm an industrial engineer. I have been literally inventing jobs since 1963. And in this discourse, we don't understand the nature of the kind of what we call job we are inventing. It's been, in my experience, for many years in the STS community, that the actual design of the content of the work that somebody's got to do every day is never a primary topic. And it should be. One. And two, we believe that AI systems might be able to, solve all kinds of problems and certainly are the wave of the future. I was challenged to write a paper for the American Nuclear Society on socio-technical systems for nuclear power plants. An utterly impossible kind of problem because there are between 500 million and a billion paths to failure in a nuclear power plant. And unfortunately, there's no way to experiment. Because of my personal prejudice on these things, I don't trust in AI. However, there is a way to trust in AI, I think. Again, my personal view, I have a paper on this, and that is if I have 2 or 3 of them and they're fighting. Imagine a situation of a dialectical system, 3 different AI, all at the very same time operating from different points of view on the same problem. And that becomes the support for human decision making. And I would certainly recommend that in medicine. We have an AI moving rapidly towards a diagnosis, and a second one maintaining alternative diagnoses. Now, there is, and I'll get off of this, a place where this work is being done that way. When we presented a paper on Fred Wolf and I I forgot where we were, Albuquerque, which is the location of the Sandia Labs. And the Sandia Labs has been charged with nuclear bomb safety since 1945. And how do they operate? They have a blue team that works all of the time to improve nuclear bomb safety. And they have a red team whose whole work is literally to destroy what the blue team does. And this has gone on for getting close to 100 years. So for me, the idea, it's much more reliable in my sense to have competing AI and multiple points of view than alone. And I'm going to get off this kick. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing this.
Can I add something?
Yes, go for it. Briefly,
very briefly. The opposing AIs will only be useful if they are trained differently using different data. If the data is the same, I doubt that it will be much useful.
Right. They have to have opposing logics.
Opposing logic and data also. Yeah. If they're trained on the same data, I don't know how much variety you have. But anyways, that's just quick response.
I think the variety comes from interpreting the same data. Because we assign meaning to data and draw conclusions and act upon those meanings.
Humans do that.
Let us suppose that the underlying model which we use or AI uses to interpret the data might be displaced by an opposing underlying model to interpret the very same data.
Okay, I might stop this discussion here, and just to bring it back to the panel where some members haven't been able to speak yet. and there's plenty of discussion to be had, I'm sure. And I think having opposing and agent, like a multi-agent system, to work on one problem, I think is a very compelling idea. I want to briefly also hand over to Kali. Kali, I think you wanted some time now. Is that right?
No, I think we can continue. Thank you, thank you, Anya. Let's continue.
Okay. I want to start our second movement, as I call it, of questions and provocations at this point, and moving us into a different direction, because one of the principles that was chosen by the group was collaborative sense making, and something which is, I find, not discussed enough in STS circles and communities is the unconscious dynamics in groups and systems behavior. And I want to ask perhaps also a quite provocative question from the inside. I do wonder, and this is also a question for the group, but in the first instance for the panel, whether anyone in this room had a moment where they realized that an AI system had changed the dynamics of a team. So it might be an AI system, it might have been a robot, in a way nobody had anticipated or designed for. And I don't necessarily mean that this as a failure, but as a shift of behavior, of patterns of relating something. It could be something that opened up through it, or something that was closed down through the human AI dynamic. And what happened, and what did it make you think? And I first want to invite Henny, if you want to come in, but don't feel compelled. Or otherwise, the person I had in mind is Jenny.
Henny, maybe while you're thinking. So I don't have a direct example myself, but one that came up in our breakout group was talking to an acquaintance recently about the agent becoming an object through which a founder and two co-founders communicate. So I asked about the impact on their team dynamic, and they said we managed to avoid more difficult confrontational conversations about our work because we say, "Oh, it wasn't you; it was your agent. I didn't like what your agent did." And on the one hand, that had a positive impact because it depersonalized things a bit, and people didn't feel so much sort of criticized, and they were able to move through the differences more quickly. And on the other hand, they started to see where they might avoid difficult conversations, which can also be a real source of creativity, creative friction, assessing risk, speaking, not turning a blind eye to things that are going on, engaging with things, but mainly the sort of creative possibility that friction can come with friction and difference.
Okay, so you seem to have argued it in both ways.
Yeah, and my initial was like, oh, that's a terrible thing, but then I came back and thought, no, I can see how that's there's some elements of that might be useful.
I was just wanting to sort of extend that a little bit. I mean, I still haven't come up with my own example, particularly because I don't work very often with what I would call human AI teams. But I do work with technology a lot, and I do recognize, based on what you're saying, Jenny, that like the situation where an AI can become the sort of the project, in unconscious dynamics, we're always projecting the blame or othering some aspect or some person. Usually it's the leader who's to blame for all the problems, and I can sort of totally imagine the scenario where that can be useful to project that onto a machine, and to there's I experience a lot of rage at the machine, even in day-to-day work with software that doesn't behave like I want it to. And so there's this sort of that kind of unconscious dynamic of wanting something to go your way and it not going your way feels very much sort of part of this, very much part of a human system that we project onto machines.
I will directly hand over to Helen. Thank you, Henny.
Yeah, so I was just going to add, I mean, it's a slightly left field example, I suppose, in the sense that I work in higher education. And I suppose where I've noticed this is you hear the phrase sort of banded around quite a lot. There's this kind of metacognitive laziness amongst perhaps some students, perhaps amongst, colleagues, where actually, we just don't need to think really anymore necessarily. But I think the thing that I've particularly noticed, maybe concerned about, is that I think AI and the capabilities that it brings allows us to potentially mask incompetence and mask problems, because actually the AI and the use of it can make somebody appear on the surface of things like they really know what they're doing. Certainly we found this, we wrote about this last year and the year before about graduates as they enter a workplace for the first time. Actually, we need to make sure we still give them the opportunity to learn, because actually they can appear far more competent through the use of some of these tools than actually they are. And that can lead to a whole load of sort of psychological problems, actually, where they're in the workplace and really kind of worried about, actually, I don't know what I'm doing, and it's sort of hidden. So I think, I know it's a slightly, as I say, left field example, but I do think that's something that we're seeing right across the board, and it's particularly salient in my field in higher education, I think.
Directly to Francis.
An example I've seen is engineers getting the ability to give an AI task very quickly in the background, going, oh, it'll do that while I'm doing something else. And then they get distracted by all those AIs making code changes and reviewing those code changes and spend unplanned time on it. And you end up getting like bugs fixed, but the planned work not happening. So there's a knock-on impact of speeding up coding or distracting coders with AI, that then your product management becomes a limiting factor, and the team coherence and what you're doing collectively. So, and I don't think weirdly, people didn't anticipate that in the industry, even though it's kind of obvious, and it's very hard to fix.
Do you have any strategies how to introduce the friction that people need to engage with the infrastructure tech critically, or to build on shared understanding or mental models of teams?
I don't think I have good ones. It's probably more enforced processes that you had anyway for doing that, because there are product management systems of various kinds you can use, but actually you kind of need to use them even more. And you can't really accelerate that work. You can help that work a bit with AI, but again, it distracts the product managers as well. And they end up, so it's very messy.
Thank you, Francis. Before we bring in Alessandro, I have one question for Henrietta. When you said that you kind of appreciated that people project use AI as a kind of leaky container, perhaps, and project their fears and hopes onto it. I, as a system psychodynamic consultant, I'm quite concerned, because what I've been noticing that I'm living from these projections. I need those projections in order to read the room and understand what's going on in groups and systems. So I've been noticing that I have less data to work with, because a lot of projection is being mounted and placed on whether it's AI agents or LLMs. But yeah, that's just perhaps more like a footnote. Alessandro.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I wanted to point out the risk of projection. In my opinion, it's the abdication of responsibility. So the risk is, okay, it's not about me, it's AI fault in a way. So I see that as a risk. And I also, in my opinion, is important also maybe to the different direction, the opposite direction, so introjection. So I think we can learn something from AI. So AI is telling something about us also, the same for robots. So
yeah, perhaps that brings us back to the question of differences between engaging and working with LLMs, generative AI or agentic AI systems, and robots. And this was something Jenny kind of hinted at, that it might be easier to engage or relate to like physical AI. But that's an open question. Perhaps more, I haven't worked a lot with robots, so I don't have a lot of experience in there. But Shankar, if you want to come in.
Yeah, I think I'm working in robotics in the lab, but I'm also doing research, qualitative research, and I actually experimented with the Gen AI, doing the qualitative analysis, which is normally a very difficult thing to do when you are not a human. But I did want to experiment with that, and I found that I had a dialogue with Microsoft Copilot because that's the one our university asks us to use. It has an analyst embedded in it. And I had a dialogue with it for about 2 hours. And initially, I did not trust the AI. So every time it was trying to lead me off, I was trying to tell them, no, 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 I don't want you to do that. I wanted you to do this. And slowly, as the project progressed, I started understanding that it is able to tell me slightly better things than what I thought of. And I started trusting it more. So I think in the end, it became a collaborative effort instead of me as a master commander asking a research assistant to do the job. I found that I was working collaboratively. So I think that's my experience of working with AI and trying to make sense of how my relationship changes.
Mm-hmm. Jenny, do you want to directly respond to that?
Yeah, I was thinking about what I was talking about earlier around resistance to enthusiasm or engagement and getting that moderated correctly to potentially an over enthusiasm. So it sounds like, Shankar, you got that really right. I think the thing that I was thinking about was what happens in a group dynamic. So not just the individual, and that you might get a dependency. And so I was thinking about another old set of, like, not the 1950s socio-technical, but Beyond's early work in terms of basic assumption dependency in the group onto AI. So Shankar's showing a sort of collaborative, but I think that when the group gets anxious, then it might tip in to dependency, and that's a risk.
Yeah, and that's a good question, how the team dynamics then shift and how quickly that happens. But I want to also take the other two questions. Stuart?
Well, thank you. Our university has certain regulations. I work in security, and we're not allowed to use AI that might be owned by other nations. So we're quite interested in digital democracy and national sovereignty. So we're very concerned if we're not allowed to use AI that can be monitored by Google and all the powers that be in the NSA. And we have.
Do you then use local models, I guess?
Well, we're supposed to, yes. And then if we do go out, we have to sort of indicate that. Because I say, I don't know if I trust Elon Musk. So, I mean, that's why it's quite interesting when you used it, whatever. But I'm sure that we know from past experience with this technology and what he's done in his commercial things that these things have problems with them when it comes to, especially since Sweden, in this case, we are on strike against Tesla. So we see them as an enemy of the worker.
Of the people. Okay, I see 3 more hands up, and I will take them perhaps like 2 minutes, 3 minutes each at most, so we get through. Yeah, so Shan, you're the next.
Yeah, thank you. Just to build on, I think human dynamics, I think I'll also expand it to not only just the kind of the team dynamics, but also the leadership dynamics as well, because it's critical leadership characteristic, defines how you hold the design really going forward. Because I'm an OD consultant, I help organizations redesign the operating model. It's about not only just the kind of the team structuring and team dynamics changing it, but how do they, once the design's been made through kind of agreement, design principles, all those good things, how do the leaders also keep in mind any decisions that they make from a human interaction or technology perspective, that there is an AI agent in the middle of it? Because as we go through the core worker scenario, eventually some of the work will be more augmented through the AI aspect. So there needs to be a kind of what's the performance metrics, what's the governance elements, all those good things need to be considered from a leadership perspective rather than just the kind of human alone as well. So yeah.
That's a lot to hold, right? In order,
Yeah.
what I'm hearing is that when you redesign workflows, you need to also redesign the entire system, in effect.
100%. Yeah, that's right.
Stephen.
I just want to point out that most of the discussion has gone on has discussed AI, but hasn't defined what it means. And different people think it means completely different things. Some people think it means large language models and using large language models. Some people think it means machine learning. Other people probably think it means automation of a type, kind of like the robot, which doesn't seem that much like AI to me. So my comment is that a fruitful discussion of AI needs to define what is the domain that we're talking about. Are we talking about organizational things, or are we talking about individuals doing individual work, et cetera, et cetera? And number two, what do we mean by AI? When we talk about that, then we might ask the question, what do we actually mean by human-centered AI? Because I've seen that discussion go on a lot without ever defining what that means.
Why don't you give us a definition of what you mean by AI?
I'm sorry, what?
Well, perhaps we can pause that, but that's a really good for more focused discussion. That would be very important.
No, it's a different discussion, but it's really important when people just go around talking about these topics at different levels of detail in totally different situations regarding different things that someone might think of as AI. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Henny.
Hello, yes. Yeah, thank you for that. It was, I mean, in a way, that's, as someone who's very much a layperson in designing, in both STS and AI and technology, I suppose one of my thoughts, having listened to all of these, and one of the thoughts that really came up when I read the article, and in particular the part that was talking about co-generative learning. So this idea that, you know, the machine is learning from us and we then learn from the machine. And, you know, in this ideal world, there's this sort of quite iterative process. But my reaction to that was like, if we consider the ways that technological systems in general, and I'm being very general about this, are evolving at this incredibly fast rate. So systems are changing constantly, and we're, you know, I actually sort of felt like that's where, for me, the sense that are we just always in this place where we're trying to catch up, where we're just trying to sort of be, you know, trying to stay ahead of something, and that our work is in this sort of continuous learning of our systems as they keep changing, rather than getting what other work needs to get done. You know, there's maybe other kinds of productivity that we lose focus of. So there's a sort of massive distraction in a sense of this constant continual learning of a system without actually getting the job done. Whatever the job is, you know, again, it's quite abstract. What is the primary task if we're sort of thinking about it in STS terms? That was just throwing that in the room.
Well, I'd like to pause here and pause here for just a moment, and also looking at the time boundary. We have 5 more minutes, and taking Henny's last comment into account, what are the ways that we can design or redesign systems in ways that they serve us rather than just trying to catch up? And I think the closing question for the audience is, how do we carry these insights, our discussions, into Monday morning organizational settings? How can we actually in day-to-day settings apply and carry in socio-technical systems insight and principles? Is that possible in a, I guess on a kind of micro level? And that's a question to the audience now. But panelists are, of course, speakers as well.
I did like your just one comment was that the introductory exercise that you did where you got us to authorize the use of the AI note taker was a good way, I thought, of just addressing something very ordinary, well, something that happens very commonly now in teams. I like that. Makes us think a little more.
Yeah. Setting the boundary ourselves. It's very important. Yeah.
I think it's about how much ready we are to receive, because to have something that is serving you, you have to be ready to receive something.
Mm-hmm. These are good. Thank you, Ruth and Alessandro. Any other comments, any other reactions, or how you might use something you learned today to think a little more deeply or to consider it in your workplace?
I have a lot of takeaways, but I like how in the survey, the collaborative aspect was the priority, because I think we are doing that on a daily basis, but I think, at least in my view, I am not being conscious about it, or I'm not adding sort of more discipline, because I know it's a system where we get to more value, but it's not something that I practically think and look for the best results. And since a lot of leaders are agreeing on this, I think now I'm taking that with me as a priority.
Thinking about
Thank you, Eli. Yeah, Michael, please.
Managing the oscillation between excitement at the potential of the technology and the existential anxiety that it presents also. That in myself and helping other people who I work with to notice that. How's it showing up for them in the moment and what do they do with it?
I wonder which of the principles applies to that. And there's one which is called socially shaped, which is very much about how the social system shapes how technology is being used in an organization. Yeah.
I thought one of the most interesting stories today was Shankar's story of his 2-hour conversation with Copilot.
Yeah.
It says a lot about collaborative sense making. That was very interesting, Shankar.
Thank you. I didn't expect that.
For qualitative research, if you need any help, we're here. So thank you.
I just want to say thank you. Thank you for the organization of this space, because I think you are very brave. It's not easy to approach AI and socio-technical. It's like you read socio-technical, something to understand better AI in every field or in your inside. I don't know. It's a good way to be here with human beings trying to understand better. So thank you.
One
Thank
thing
you,
that I
Mariana.
wanna add to our conversation from Japanese culture. I think so cultural differences influence the argument of what is the AI, what is the intelligence, or what is a robot, what robotics, because I posted in a chat, mostly Japanese believe, so robotics or AI system is a piece of nature. Nobody believe that the AI and robotics can separate from human being. It's a nature, it's a machine, but it's a product of nature. And also we are organic human, but it's a piece of nature. So most of Japanese cannot separate between machine and human. So that's the reason we Japanese love to use robots in the frontline worker. Also believe so. Someday in the future, so robots can become a good friend, a partner of our human nature.
Okay, right.
Thank you for adding that cultural perspective, which was entirely missing. So thank you, Ken. That's fascinating to have this kind of how are we defining our relationship to AI?
Yeah, what's interesting, I come from a criminological background, and I'm trying to figure out how these systems are trying to kill us. So I look at this, and I have essentially from the Chinese perspective, how they're trying to show how robots actually take down crime. It's quite an interesting type of perspective. They're trying to prove that robots are good for society because they have rollbacks there. So there's an article on the criminological perspective, how they did correlations between the degree of robotation and the criminal rate in certain special zones in China. So there's they're trying to build up a myth about the correlation between industrialization and less crime.
Thank you, Stuart. I see another hand up there, but I need to be quite clear on holding the time boundary. And I want to thank everyone, especially Shankar as our speaker, to introducing us to your research and to what's going on at the frontier, really, on human-robot teams. It's amazing to get that insight into your research hub, and also all of the other panelists, and most of all, Valentina and Carly for hosting us, and all participants, because I think we have co-created a sort of sociotechnical systems, even if temporary, and we perhaps can reflect on what kind of principles we have reenacted. And that may be quite fascinating to consider what kind of values and beliefs and behaviors were at play here, and what didn't we discuss, which is much even as telling as all the things which were raised today. So yes, thank you all, and I hope to see you. There was Valentina, you wanted to say something about the next session, right?
Yes, I have a slide.
Oh,
Carly, would you like to?
You ended that so lovely, Anya. I was going to save it for another time, but if you have enjoyed this conversation and you're still with us, please do join us for more of our programming. Our next Making Work Worth Doing session is going to be next month, same time, same place. We'll be hearing from Caitlin Begg. She is a sociologist, an American sociologist. She's also an STS practitioner and OD consultant, and works both in the New York area, greater US, and also in Europe. So please come. She'll have a multicultural perspective to share with us, and her interpretation of STS as a designer. We have a very special session. We're taking August off, so enjoy your summer break, and coming back for Dr. Anne-Louise Howard from Concordia University, who will be talking about the case of women in engineering, and if we can potentially use STS to create gender equity in not just engineering, but perhaps other environments. That's going to be a very special two-part session. If you come to hear about her dissertation and her research, then you'll be invited to come back for a separate session where we're actually going to tackle her research as an STS challenge and see if there is something that we could offer her and her the community that she supports. So if you're an engineer, if you know an engineer, if you love engineers, consider coming to that event. And of course, our conference is going to be in Berlin coming up in September, and all the registration details are on our website. We hope to see many of you there. Thank you so much, Anya and panelists. You've done a marvelous job, and I'm so grateful you've come together today during the heat wave to be here for our audience and larger community. So, community, we're grateful for you as well. With that, have a wonderful rest of your day.